So welcome to our Feeling the Pulse session for July. My name is Murray Benton and I work within the Community Housing Futures Program delivery team. These monthly online sessions are a regular learning exchange, primarily for community housing providers, which focuses on investment and growth activities. It also includes briefings and information around our program. These sessions also allow different opportunities to exchange information, which can include or identify certain challenges or barriers that we can be experiencing, and we can bring those forward for some collaborative discussions around solutions focus. And it also allows us to hear from relevant guest speakers and presenters, which we have a fantastic one today, which I'm looking forward to. So just some quick housekeeping before we kick things off. This session is being recorded for distribution purposes. And if you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat as it is being moderated, and we will have a Q&A at the end, so there'll be ample opportunity. I would like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners and caretakers of the various lands that we're all meeting or dialing in from today. For me here in Brisbane, that's beautiful Meanjin country, which is the home of the Turrbal and Yagara people. And so please feel free to share your location or country or mob in the chat function if you like. And I'd just like to further extend my respect to elders past and present and give my ongoing support to those emerging, and extend a former warm welcome to any First Nations brothers or sisters that are joining us online today. Now, our Community Housing Futures program is the host of Q Shelter's Feeling the Pulse online sessions, which most of you will be aware. And so our program is a collaboration between these three peak and industry bodies, as well as Queensland Government. So Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Housing Queensland is a non-government peak body that works together with members and partners to eliminate disparities in housing experienced by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in Queensland. And Neil Wilmot is the Chief Executive Officer within our program governance structure. Community Housing Industry Association is an independent industry body representing community housing organisations here in Queensland, and we have Anne-Marie Callender as the Executive Officer. And then Q Shelter is a peak body in Queensland working to influence solutions to housing and homelessness across an array of influence and sector support mechanisms. And so Fiona Cornelia, which everybody will know, is our Chief Executive Officer and a part of our program's governance structure as well. Now, I'm going off the track a little bit just with this next slide, and I haven't told Alana, and so she may have an issue with me later, but I just really want to take a moment to, on behalf of Community Housing Futures, just say a special thank you to Alana for her dedication to our program and Community Housing Futures and the state of Queensland over the last 18 months. And so this will be Alana's last Feeling the Pulse session with us. So she'll be starting a new exciting role as Director of Social and Affordable Housing, Housing and Homelessness Programs with the Department of Housing, Local Government Planning and Public Works. So that is a bit of a mouthful, but I managed to get that through in the end. And so Alana has contributed real considerable value to our work, being the leader of this project. And we know that she'll be a great addition to the department. And we're just really fortunate to know that she'll still be remaining very much in our sector with the great work that she contributes for us all. So with that now said, Alana, I'm going to hand the spotlight over to you just to give us a bit of an update on July's program update for CHF.
Thanks, Murray. That's very unexpected of you. I'll have to buy you lunch tomorrow or something like that.
Look, I was gonna say I've only got you as my manager for another week and a half, so you can't really.
And you picked some of the good photos as well, because I know you've got some terrible ones of me. So I really appreciate.
I'm gonna share them to Liz Bot later.
They'll come out at the Christmas party, I'm sure.
They will.
Great. Just a quick update from me today before we jump into our guest speaker. And as always, thanks for having me, and thanks for having me over the last 18 months. It's been an absolute pleasure in this role. I've loved every moment of it. So I leave with absolute gratitude. But in terms of Community Housing Futures, we are rolling out our tools, training and resources, and they will continue to roll out over the year. So stay tuned for updates and more opportunities as they come available. And always just make sure checking in on our opportunities page. We do send out notifications whenever we put a new opportunity up there, but it's always good to check into it every now and then just to see what's up there. Our opportunities page, for those that don't know, at Community Housing Futures, it's a platform that serves as a bit of a centralised hub for accessing a broad range of opportunities specifically designed for community housing providers. So I think at the moment, Murray, up there at the moment, there's Arup are happy to do some pro bono work for some CHPs. We've got and a couple of other organisations as well. Ingenia Caravan Parks are interested in having a chat to a couple of CHPs. So it's a good way for us to kind of put it out there, and then CHPs can kind of jump on and see if there's something there that they're interested in, rather than us trying to make those connections ourselves and at the risk of missing someone out. So the Community Housing Futures program, we had a governance meeting yesterday, and I just wanted to also flag to this group that we're looking at doing a much more intentional sector consultation to support our advocacy for the design of iteration 2. So I've just flagged that here. We're working through what that will look like, and we'll go out to the sector on the kind of scheduling around that. But I thought it was good timing to raise that here. And then there's just a couple of opportunities that I've popped on the screen that I thought would be really interesting for this group. There are a couple of free webinars. The first one is the Now proposition, exploring growth and availability of housing supply. Got a really great panel there. It's online, and it's about what we need to do now, what we need to do soon to address the current needs. So I think that's a really interesting one. I'll be there. And then there's another one that's free as well, which is RTA Advanced Training, Elevate Your Tenancy Management. So that is specifically for CHPs and SHS employees around the Residential Tenancies Act. So some interesting pieces of work there. And that's all from me. If anyone had any questions, I'm happy to take them. I'll also just flag that my work number with Q Shelter is actually my personal number as well. So everyone, you can still contact me anytime if you've got any questions.
Alana, you've left that on recording and we're distributing this.
Well, anything industry related and you want to soundboard something or have a chat, I'm always open for a chat about community housing.
Awesome. Thank you, Alana. And if anybody does have any questions for Alana, just pop them in the chat and we can redirect back to that towards the end of this session. And so now with that being said, I'd really like to introduce Angelene. It's much like Alana's new title. Angelene's also got quite an extensive title as well. And so I'll leave that there for you to have a look at. But Angelene is a descendant of Wiradjuri Nation in central New South Wales and a public servant of 22 years. Angelene's expertise is in strategic policy affecting First Nations people, and most recently she's been involved in policy work to establish Queensland's path to treaty, including the Truth Telling and Healing Inquiry with the First Nations Treaty Institute. So Angelene currently in her role, it relates to establishing the Queensland's First Nations Housing and Homelessness Partnership to enable shared power and decision-making between Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and the Queensland Government as a part of Our Place, which most of us will be semi-familiar with, which is a housing and homelessness roadmap until 2031, and then there's an action plan from 24 to 27. And so welcome, Angelene. We're really thrilled to have you here with us today. Now, I will just quickly, hopefully I can make this a smooth transition for everybody. Pop this up. Can everyone just see?
Yeah, all good.
Oh, awesome. It's taken me 18 months, Alana, and we've got there. So straight over to you, Angelene.
Thank you. Thank you for the warm welcome. I'd too like to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the lands that we're all dialing in from today, and elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to extend that acknowledgement to any First Nations peoples on the call today. As Mary said, my name is Angelene Thistleton. I'm Director of Research and Data Partnerships with the Department of Housing, Local Government and Planning and Public Works. I have supported the development of the Our Place Roadmap and Action Plan, including facilitating its approval through government. And my current role is focused on establishing the Queensland First Nations Housing and Homelessness Partnership. I am a descendant of Wiradjuri Nation through my mother and my grandmother, with connections to the Magic family in central New South Wales. Can we just go to slide 2, please, Murray? So I'm here to present on the Our Place Roadmap and Action Plan, just to provide you with a bit of background. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and the industry, peak and sector partners were invited to have their say to inform the Our Place Action Plan. An open invitation to participate in the consultation was distributed through social media, partners, email and broader networks. Consultation opened on the 9th of June 2023 and closed on the 25th of July 2023. However, 3 additional yarning circles were scheduled after that date due to community request. 3 different approaches were used during the consultation. We held yarning circles, online surveys, and took organisational submissions. The mix of consultation methods provided options for a range of individuals and organisations to share their insights in different ways. In total, 324 people from 40 locations across Queensland had their say and shared their housing priorities and ideas for a better housing future for First Nations peoples in Queensland. A consultation summary is publicly available on the Our Place webpage, which I'll put up at the end if you're interested in more detail about what we heard. Moving on to the next slide. Through the Our Place consultation, we heard what matters most to your sector, your organisations and the communities you serve. This helped to identify key priorities to shape the 27 actions under the action plan and drive investment where it is needed most. Today, we'll talk about some of these priorities across the sector and how these are reflected in the Our Place action plan. For many in the sector, it was important to see dedicated actions that will grow the First Nations community-controlled sector with an emphasis on Indigenous community housing organisations. It was also equally important that the sector is supported by a strong First Nations housing peak body. We will establish a dedicated community housing upgrade and maintenance program to be delivered in partnership with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Housing Queensland, reduce barriers to the National Regulatory Scheme for Community Housing Participation, and expand Housing Queensland's capacity to deliver partnership and sector strengthening activities. We also heard strongly across the sector that it's important to address barriers to renting to ensure successful tenancies and increase access to private market options. Some of the ways we're supporting successful tenancies include delivering a first-time renters support program to navigate the renting system, developing a co-designed First Nations property management and sales training program that will elevate the standard of practice in the real estate sector. The sector also highlighted the need for culturally safe and appropriate services to meet individual, community, cultural needs and circumstances. Next slide. Our vision is that every First Nations person in Queensland has a place to call home that is safe, secure, and meets personal, locational, and cultural needs, and that this home provides the foundations to thrive. We know that a significant proportion of First Nations peoples experience homelessness and need access to social housing. Our Place seeks to reorient the mainstream housing system to be more responsive to the needs of First Nations peoples. The roadmap to 2031 aligns with the Closing the Gap National Agreement and will be enacted through the Our Place Action Plan, followed by a further 4-year action plan. Next slide. This slide shows the theory of change that underpins the roadmap and action plan. It might be a little bit hard to read here, so let me know if you need me to send through the slide deck for distribution. One of the key findings of the recent Productivity Commission report into the implementation of the National Agreement on Closing the Gap was that any actions to close the gap must be underpinned by a strong theory of change. So this is why this is up front in the Our Place roadmap. This theory of change ensures that the investment and effort we put into place now is taking us towards a common goal, and that that goal is one that is well understood and shared by all who are contributing. Next slide. The actions in Our Place in the action plan are grouped under 5 priority areas and underpinned by strong governance and accountability. Partnerships and shared responsibility drive whole of system responsibility and accountability for First Nations housing outcomes, guided by First Nations leadership and shared decision making. Strong sector grows the size, viability and sustainability of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community controlled sector to deliver housing and homelessness outcomes. A reliable and culturally safe service and support system shapes fairer, more reliable, accessible, integrated and culturally safe housing and homelessness supports and services. Culturally responsive supply solutions delivers more culturally responsive, affordable supply solutions that meet the wellbeing needs and life circumstances of First Nations peoples living in Queensland locations. And finally, private market pathways increases access for First Nations peoples living in Queensland to private market rental and home ownership opportunities. Next slide. The Our Place partnership principles guide how we work collectively to implement the Our Place roadmap and action plans. These principles centre the strengths and leadership of First Nations communities, individuals, organisations and families, and acknowledge the commitment, dedication, resources and innovation of the whole housing and homelessness sector. The Our Place partnership principles are the core principle to enable self-determination, deliver place-based and person-centred responses, assert that housing is central to physical, social and community wellbeing, embrace truth-telling, building cultural safety and eliminating racism, deliver long-term skilling and economic benefit for First Nations communities, and pursue First Nations-led evidence-based responses and embedding data sovereignty. Next slide. Homes for Queenslanders was also released just before Our Place. At least half of all new social homes delivered or supported by the state will follow special design standards through Homes for Queenslanders to suit older Queenslanders and people with a disability. At least half of all new social homes delivered or supported will follow special design standards. Oh, I've just repeated myself, apologies. There will also be supported accommodation for young people and those experiencing domestic and family violence. Together with Homes for Queenslanders, the Our Place Roadmap and Action Plan will work together to overcome inequity in the housing system for First Nations peoples living in Queensland and accelerate our progress towards closing the housing gap in Queensland. Next slide. Queensland First Nations Housing and Homelessness Partnership. So governance and accountability for Our Place will be shared through the Queensland First Nations Housing and Homelessness Partnership, co-chaired by Neil Wilmot, CEO of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Housing Queensland, and Mark Cridland, the Director General of the Department of Housing, Local Government and Planning and Public Works. The partnership will provide strategic direction to guide implementation of the Our Place Action Plan with a focus on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultural perspectives. It will keep partners accountable to First Nations communities for the delivery of the Our Place Action Plan. It will shape policy recommendations and investment decisions related to First Nations housing and homelessness reforms with a focus on positive impact and value. The partnership will inform Queensland's participation in the Closing the Gap Housing Policy Partnership at a federal level, connecting state and Commonwealth First Nations housing and homelessness priorities. The partnership will facilitate the development of a First Nations housing and homelessness partnership agreement between the Queensland Government, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Housing Queensland and sector partners, guiding strong and accountable partnerships. This will be a formal agreement that defines roles, objectives, the scope of shared decision-making and agreed ways of working that are strong to facilitate strong, accountable partnerships that support the long-term implementation of the Our Place Roadmap to 2031. Excuse me for 1 second. Sorry, I'm not used to doing this much talking. Next slide, please. Working with the sector. The next steps on the journey towards a fairer housing future for First Nations people in Queensland must build upon the important work already done, benefit from the evidence of what works, and be co-designed with First Nations peoples, non-government organisations and local government authorities, and supported by sector partners and industry. To accelerate First Nations outcomes in all housing and homelessness responses, we know it will require governments, the housing and homelessness sector and industry working together. As we implement Our Place over the next 4 years and beyond, we will work with the sector and place First Nations peoples at the centre of how these solutions are designed and delivered. This will involve us actively working to remove barriers to First Nations communities assuming leadership, governance and authority, and seeking the meaningful transfer of resources and decision-making to First Nations communities. We also know that self-determination is foundational for communities to thrive, and there are many different expressions of self-determination. A strong community-controlled sector is one of those expressions and extends to the First Nations housing peak body. We'll continue to build a strong partnership with Housing Queensland to build on the work done and who will play a key role in ensuring strong and accountable partnerships. These approaches collectively will help us take forward the action plan together with the sector so that we can acknowledge the past, prepare for the future and act now to close the housing gap for First Nations communities in Queensland. Next and final slide. At the bottom there is the Our Place Action Plan and Roadmap website, where you can download and read both the Roadmap and Action Plan, the Community Consultation Guide and other material. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you for your time today. I'm happy to take any questions you have and get back to you if I can't answer them today. My main responsibility and area that I'm knowledgeable in is in the partnership, but happy to take any other questions on notice and get back to you.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Angelene. I just want to double check. I've just stopped sharing that presentation. Is everyone back to their normal screen? Awesome.
Yep.
See a few nods there. Hey, Mandy, good to see you.
Not quite normal, Murray. It's got your ugly mug on it.
Well, do you know, I was going to say that you were the next face that popped up before. I just seen Ria as well, and I thought I'd give you a shout out, but after that, I'm not going to. Mark, but good to see you.
And I see Mark's got is in Tanya Wilson's Zoom account as well.
Yeah, Tanya's here, but she just had to step out and take a phone call. So I send her greetings as well. Oh, she's back now.
Just to Angelene, thanks for that presentation. It's really good for that dialogue to come to the forefront of some of our minds. And I guess for me, I just have a question to kick off for you. So just in terms of how organisations, and one of those last slides talked around, I guess, self-determination for First Nations people, but I guess in terms of organisations being involved, and when we talk about co-design and consultation, and I'm probably positioning this more for some of our regional CHPs that through this program we built some really good relationships with, but if there are organisations that haven't been a part of the consultation process for this action plan and roadmap, do you have any suggestions or any advice for how organisations could be involved, and even if that is at a local level, sort of underpinning, yes, the work that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Housing Queensland, or as we refer to as ATSI HQ, as well as department within this work, you know, leading this. But is there anything that you could suggest organisations in terms of implementation in their own communities, especially if they're not a First Nations-led organisation? What would be your suggestions to get involved and kind of help walk alongside this work, you know, with your department and ATSI HQ to roll this out?
It's a really good question. I think the principles that underpin the Our Place Roadmap and Action Plan really guide everything that we do as an agency to reorient the mainstream housing system to be more responsive to First Nations peoples, and those principles could be applied by any organisation in how they operate. In addition, structurally, through the Queensland First Nations Housing and Homelessness Partnership that's being established, really provides or will provide that forum for shared decision making. So as part of doing that work, there will be the development of a monitoring and evaluation framework for Our Place. To develop that along with the partnership agreement that's been referred to, there will need to be further engagement with organisations and the community. So I think consultation is a point in time, but it also doesn't stop as we continue the work. So yeah, those would be some ways.
Yep, thanks.
So I guess the plan's in place now. What are the next steps in terms of implementation?
Another good question. We're very busy doing our implementation planning. So as part of that is actually unpacking each of the 27 actions and designing project plans. I mentioned $61.3 million was approved by government to implement the action plan over the next 4 years. So in order to get that money expended, there's a lot of work in terms of recruiting people and designing projects and getting procurement authority and those sorts of things. So that's very solidly where a good portion of the team is at. And as I mentioned, my role is more in establishing the partnership to really oversee and guide how the Our Place Action Plan and Roadmap are implemented.
I think it's good for this group to know that, so under the 27 actions, there'll be project plans for each. And I guess there's even opportunity for some of the CHPs that can play a role in supporting some of those actions.
It possibly, and as those project plans are completed by the various areas across the department, because of course, you know, First Nations housing and homelessness, where I come from, is a relatively small area, and we've got quite a large department, and I think around 30% of the department's clients are First Nations people. So it really is around the whole of the department, reorienting what they do, and our role in those touch points of influence and changing how they work. So, and a big part of that is establishing those partnerships at a local level between the department and community service providers.
Anybody else have any?
Murray, should we put Mark on the spot? And
Well, you beat me to it. I was going to wait. I was going to be like, well, I mean, we've got lovely Tanya and also Mark sitting in the room, and I didn't want to sort of bring attention to it straight away. But yeah, I guess we've got the opportunity now. So just if there was any sort of just reflections or initial comments from either of you, you know, and obviously this has been a huge ongoing vision and body of work. You know, somebody referred to it as groundbreaking to me just this week in terms of, you know, acknowledging our history, but also looking at the work ahead and knowing, I guess, the dire need across the state, but especially within this context, is, and not to put you on the spot and not be pre-planned, sorry, but Mark, is there anything, or Tanya, you've always got, you know, wonderful words of wisdom, so, you know, always value you both.
Thank you for the opportunity. And Tanya will, I mean that in the most genuine way possible. Tanya will no doubt add some remarks as she feels moved. But we acknowledge the importance of the strategy and the action plan. The resourcing is welcome, though always could be more. And when you reflect on the absolute need, then what's going to be critical as we move forward is that we're not just bounded by the Our Place action plan and its ambitions, but we're able to influence other strategies and influence other paths to outcome as well. So critical is going to be influencing the overall delivery under the housing strategy more broadly to also achieve positive outcomes for our communities and places. And so we were looking, for example, this morning at some research that or analysis of census data that UQ has done for us. And what stood out for both Tanya and I in that discussion was the number of homeless Indigenous First Nations people who are characterised by being young, between the ages of 15 and 24, the majority of them, and there are a significant number of children within that cohort of homeless First Nations people of that age range. So a lot of single parents, children 0 to 4, major interactions with the child protection system, therefore, no doubt in time with the justice system, etc. The opportunity to influence early childhood strategies, the child protection safety mechanisms, etc., has to be taken if we're going to make a difference. So it's not just about the narrow, well, I don't know, narrow is the right description, but it's not just about Our Place and the strategies in there. It's about continuing influence more broadly.
Ditto to all that. And you know, we're still in the early stages of, as Angelene had said, unpacking each of the 27 actions within the Our Place plan. I'm keen to get more involved with that from our end, but very interested, I guess, and I myself will be voicing across through the partnership, ensuring that you know, majority of that 61 million hits the ground, that it doesn't get chewed up in administrative costs or, you know, unnecessary costs, basically, that the majority of that money hits the ground out to community where it's needed most. But yeah, the data that we're working on with University of Queensland, it's tells a very sad story, one that for us Indigenous folk and for those working in the sector, one that is consistent across our history, but it seems like it's getting worse. So very keen to use some of that data and some of this planning.
Yeah. let's make a real
Absolutely.
difference.
I think too as well from my just my own sort of perspective looking at this and even with the plan when we look at those key themes, and I mean obviously the key themes have been pulled out from that research and consultation and what we already know, but I think the supporting person-centered responses for what they need most is really out of all of those key areas. I'm looking at them now: overcrowding, culturally safe services, racism, cost of living. Like there's so many within those sort of key themes, but underpinning all of that is that person-centered responses. And I think, Tanya, what you've really hit the nail on the head in this conversation with me is exactly around getting it to that grassroots level, but it really needs to be from, it can't be that cookie cutter approach, and for that stuff to actually roll out and be effective. And I think we all in this forum would agree to this, you know, not just within a First Nations context, but any vulnerable young person, but particularly knowing our histories, for our people is really that person-centered approach and looking at it going, you know, from what you were saying as well, Mark, that there's, you know, so many different factors that come into, you know, young people, for example, and at what touch point do they come into the system, and then to what level, you know, that person-centric, I guess, lens is what will unlock a lot of that potential, and show the root causes and true sort of, you know, factors there. So, yeah, that was just from what you both have said, what I just pulled out in line with Angeline's presentation. That's really important from my perspective. But does anybody else have anything they want to reflect or add? Maybe anybody from the regions and what they're experiencing. I know we've got some CHPs that work with some really diverse First Nations families that are here at the moment. You're good to go, Mandy. I was waiting for you.
Waiting to see if anyone else wanted to
Yeah.
say anything.
Yep.
Hi, Angelene. Mandy Thompson. I'm from a family homelessness service in Townsville. So we're not a First Nations specific service, but more than 50% of our clients identify as Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander families. So we're keen to participate in there, and I'll read this plan in a lot more detail, and I'm not overly familiar with it. I'll just be upfront and honest. So this is a good session for me, but we're really keen to work out how do we become more culturally appropriate in our responses to both homeless families who we can't house because we know there's not enough housing, but also for families that are in our housing. So keen to stay engaged with the plan and understand how non-First Nations led services can actually make an impact into the outcomes that the government's trying to achieve here.
As you do work your way through the plan, there's some really relevant actions in there around developing First Nations housing and homelessness practice standards. There's around expanding local housing plans, which are place-based, into, and not just in remote and discrete communities, also in urban and regional communities, and also things like research related demographic population projection map, building the First Nations housing and the homelessness evidence base around what works, all really, really relevant things.
Great. I'll have keen to stay involved, or become involved, I should say.
And so I guess just on that, you know, point with what you've said, Mandy, and I guess Angelene, in terms of, you mentioned earlier that you're happy to send through a slide deck that we can distribute, and we'll have this recording as well. But just in terms of if let's say an organisation like Mandy's at Feet wanted to reach out, or in their community, it could be the Housing and Homelessness Network, they might go, you know, this would actually be really valuable for the broader housing and homelessness landscape to hear some of this body of work. Is Department of Housing in the position at the moment to, upon request, be able to provide presentations or information, or what would be the mechanism where people across the industry could reach out, and who's the best point of contact for that to get some more information, or is it just redirecting at this stage through to these plans?
We have got amplification kits and information that we can distribute. If you email on the very last slide there, it's ourplace@housing.qld.gov.au. We could provide material by email. We're a little thin on the ground at the moment while we're madly recruiting. In terms of delivering presentations, but that would be a starting point to make contact with us.
Yeah.
Angelene, it's Mark from ATSI HQ.
Hi.
I haven't got the plan in front of me, and therefore I've got a hazy recollection I'm relying on. But within the plan, there's commitments around housing plans themselves, localised housing plans. I can't recall though whether that's specific to local government areas or whether that's kind of more broadly. Are you in a position to comment more fully on that as part of the plan?
Sure. So local housing plans were initially a commitment in the first Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander action plan. So slightly different to local housing action plans, which are run through LGAQ, Local Government Association of Queensland. So the local housing plans are in remote and discrete communities developed in partnership with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander councils, or also in urban and regional communities. So we've just completed a local housing plan for Logan with community representatives in Logan in partnership with Gunya Meta as a community organisation. So implementation of that local housing plan will be managed through Gunya Meta, who's been funded to monitor implementation, but also bringing together the Housing Service Centre as well as First Nations housing and homelessness to monitor those actions that have been identified in the local housing plan. So not restricted to LGAs. And we're looking through this second action plan, the Outpost Action Plan, to expand those local housing plans into Cairns and Mount Isa.
Yeah. Is there an opportunity to go beyond just Cairns and Mount Isa? So, for example, to bear on Mandy's comments earlier, is it a possibility for Townsville to develop its a local housing plan? And if so, what's the mechanism?
Yeah, I think it's the mechanism is certainly a conversation. Whether it's a conversation with First Nations housing and homelessness, we could bring together the HSC. Yeah, I mean, the vision is that these sorts of place-based responses will be built on and continue. Logan, Cairns, Mount Isa is where we're at currently. But yeah, happy to take that conversation offline if that's helpful, Mark.
It just strikes me that it's a good way, and Mandy, you might want to reflect on this yourself, but that would be a good avenue through which Mandy's needs to become more of a culturally competent, I might describe it, organisation could be expressed or actualised.
Absolutely.
You got any thoughts yourself, Mandy?
100%. So yeah, if there is a mechanism or a way that we can come together locally to build our competency, we would be fully supportive of that as a service, like as an individual service. But then through our local housing and homelessness network, which I lead the advocacy subgroup, one of the subcommittees in that. We have a range of different services, a range of different SHSs and CHPs, and we could all do better. So if there's a way that we can engage somehow to use this as a tool to give us some rigour and some accountability around improving our service delivery, I think our sector would be for. I can't speak for the whole network, but I would certainly be encouraging people in our network locally to engage with the process if there's some structure that we can use to guide it.
And I don't know too, Mark, with that and spot on, I think, Mandy, but just if I draw back to Angelene, your presentation, that slide around the First Nations Housing and Homelessness Partnership, and one of those kind of key elements was around I guess the creation of that necessary structure to be able to empower some of that work. And I just don't know if it's a bit too early or maybe it's not quite the group for that, but just in terms of that sort of feedback and being able to bring those, establishment of those mechanisms and considerations in, is that sort of some of the functions that this sort of group may be able to bring forward in terms of hearing what they're hearing, throughout the state and going, we may want more organisations like FEET, for example, to be involved, and they're indicating that. What is those structures, I guess, for empowerment for First Nations people, but also just the sector in general to come along the journey? I think that's a really critical part too. So I'm not sure if that sort of that group will be the right platform for that, or if that's just me being a bit presumptuous. But is there anything there, Angelene? Just
I think it does sit within their remit. I mean, part of their purpose is to shape the policy recommendations and investment decisions in relation to the First Nations housing and homelessness reforms, as well as that monitoring and evaluation mechanism for our place. So, if part of that is local housing plans are doing really well in urban locations, let's do more of that. Then, and that's the forum for shared decision making. So I don't want to preempt what they will consider and what they will decide, but that's certainly the mechanism for it. And building on what Mark said earlier around it's bigger than just housing and homelessness. The QFNH partnership connects with the National Housing Policy Partnership, which is one of those policy partnerships under the Closing the Gap reform. So it really provides that structural connection into the Closing the Gap program more broadly, which of course has a range of policy partnerships, including at the moment there's a justice policy partnership, but is connected with all of the other areas of Closing the Gap.
Yeah, great.
Hey Murray, sorry,
Yeah.
and Angelene, I'm just really quickly, I've got the plan up and I'm going through all the action items. So there is actually one around that is specific to Townsville around deliver, evaluate and strengthen the First Nation prisoner reintegration program in Townsville. And so that is something that, could assist us, particularly from FEET point of view. We're really keen to see children reunified with their parents and support them with stable housing outcomes. Women exiting the prison here in Townsville, we're really worried about how they're getting their children back, all of those sorts of things. So I think there could be, and I'll go through the plan in a bit more detail, but there could be some very specific things that each region could tap into across the state, maybe.
That's fantastic. I'm glad you highlighted that one, Mandy. And Angelene, you mentioned, Angelene, in your presentation that the stage of work is up to the development of the project plans around all the initiatives. Obviously, there's a project plan being developed for this initiative. So without meaning to put you on the spot, but possibly doing so, and I apologise for that, what's the mechanism by which we get true co-design for those project plans? So how does FEET, by way of an example, how does Mandy get to see what's proposed and give comment on whether it's reasonable or not? Do you get what I mean? How does that broadly based input of co-design happen in these project plans?
I think that the partnership between ATSI-HQ and the department as co-designers of our place and as co-deliverers of our place, I think that's really the mechanism. So in a practical sense, perhaps it's a conversation between Neil and our DG or Danielle McAllister, my DDG, to figure out the next steps in terms of making those sorts of things a reality. It's probably would be my suggestion.
Mark, should I just stay in touch with you maybe?
Yeah, do, by all means, because our ambitions would be to tap into your goodwill and your expertise as we move forward. So we very much want you as a partner, and please understand that. So stay in touch.
Yeah, good. Because I mean, I know I'm rabbiting on about Townsville specific things, but like in the last month, 2 of our tenants, First Nations women have been incarcerated at the Stewart prison. We're very worried about them. We did, so this is a thing this is an issue that we're very, very worried about locally. So yeah, I'll stay in touch with you, Mark. I'll send you a note separately and see what.
And I don't think too, Mandy. I think that's exactly what this platform's for, is to have some of those kind of reflections and conversations. So it's super relevant. And yeah, definitely everybody's here to listen as much as you're willing to share. And so just for the people that are here during this conversation, but also the recording, I'm happy if anybody wants to email through a bit of a request or just some info, and then I can be that link directly with Mark for you, just to kind of get that connection in. I'll do that exciting follow-up from this for you, Mandy, in this instance, but also moving forward. And then, yeah, we can just be that point of contact. But I'm mindful of time. We are 1
Murray,
minute
I'll
over.
just stop. Liz was going to just quickly say
Oh,
something.
yes, jump in.
Sorry.
Yes. Yeah, no,
No,
please.
no, that's okay, Mark. I was just going to say, Mark, I'd like to stay in contact with you because we're similar to Mandy, where I think that from a practical point of view, there's a number of SHSs and CHPs that can actually, you know, provide practical examples and you know, and really have some great input and outcomes into the co-design programs.
Yeah, thank you, Liz. That's a generous offer and gratefully received. And we'll make every avenue. So I'll talk further with Murray about how we best coordinate this interest. But as Murray suggested, he will be the initial conduit, I think, because this is a Q Shelter forum after all.
Yes, yeah. Oh, and the other thing too, I think collectively, you know, we can have department doing their bit and we can have our CHQ doing their bit as well, but we all have our own agency and our own opportunity to be involved in this as well. And so if we can be, like you said, Mark, a conduit in support of our CHQ and department and their partnership in this, because it benefits us all really. So more than happy for any kind of emails to come through my way and go from there. So if there's no final, just pop your digital hand up for me if you do want to make any sort of formal last comments or remarks, and if not, we might close the meeting, but I will just do that just with a few kind of quick closing marks. So one, Angelene, thanks so much for your time. And I know that we were going to have some other people in your team join today. And so the fact that you've whipped that together and been able to hold true to that presentation within such a short time frame is really appreciative. To both Tanya and Mark from HQ, thanks so much for your input and value on being here today for this body of work, but also just in general. And to Alana, you know, just in final closing, it's been a great time working with you, and we wish you all the best. Mark's wiping the tears away. But that concludes our Feeling the Pulse session for July. Been really good to see everybody, and always nice to see some friendly faces online. And we'll connect with you all again soon.
Thanks, everyone. See ya.
Thanks for having me.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.